Thank you for joining the Veterinary Hope Foundation Holiday Chat. At Veterinary Hope Foundation, we envision a world where every veterinary professional is part of a community of mutual support and growth. Join VHF Director Krista Martin and veterinarian and board member Dr. Heather Owen as they discuss VetMed and the holidays.
I am a veterinarian and I own my own practice called Animal Acupuncture and Canine Sports Medicine Facility. I'm located in Tulsa, Oklahoma. My job is to help dogs walk again when there's not enough medications to get them up and moving. So we help joints move, we help diagnose tendon and ligament injuries, we help with chronic arthritis management cases, we help with hospice and end of life planning as well, because some conditions are chronic and we want to help that client have a valuable end to that pet's life. For Veterinary Hope Foundation, I am honored and privileged to come onto the board as the secretary. And so I've gotten to watch this organization develop from its infancy, and I am so proud to get to be a part of it. Our goal, helping to introduce veterinarians to pre-management before we end up in a crisis situation. And so our goal is to help save the veterinary profession by allowing people to know how we can help before a problem starts. So that's me in a nutshell. I've got 4 human children, 6 animal children. I now have a Dobie bottom coming up onto my lap, and we have a Chihuahua and a mini Aussie and 3 cats. So it's kind of like the 12 days of Christmas around here, a partridge in a pear tree. And I'm that normal vet, right?
Hi, I'm Krista. I'm a clinical social worker in Greenville, South Carolina, kind of tucked into the foothills of the Blue Ridge Mountains. And I do a couple of things. I operate my own practice, which specializes in veterinary social work. Primarily, that looks like working with veterinarians, techs, and other animal professionals. But we also run a pet loss and bereavement support group. And I serve as the director for the Veterinary Hope Foundation. I live with 1 teenage human, my partner, 2 dogs, and a cat. So my zoo is a little bit smaller than your zoo, Heather, but it feels loud and raucous and all over the place at times. And that's how we would have it, right? We wouldn't have it
Right.
any other way.
Controlled chaos, right?
I mean, I don't know that I'd go with controlled. It might just be chaos. And that's okay. Maybe we're not supposed to try to control the chaos.
I would agree on that one.
Today, we're kind of talking about this idea of the holidays and family and vet med and how we blend and balance and kind of make all that work within one human. Heather, you are one human.
Yeah.
How do we do that? How do we kind of balance vet med and our holidays that are coming up?
So I think that's a great question, especially when we were just joking about how we can't control chaos, right? And then we throw something else into it, which is even more chaotic. And I know for a lot of moms that aren't veterinarians, the holidays are enough to push them over the edge anyway, just because it's extra added onto our plates. But for DVM moms, I think it's even harder because we're still trying to be a normal practitioner while we're absorbing the balance of whatever your holiday season looks like. For me, it's embracing the chaos. I start planning in advance for the holiday season, and I start planning by prepping clients. One of my big things that I have advocated for myself and for my family are boundaries, personal boundaries, professional boundaries. And holidays are important to me. They're important to my children. They're important to my husband. And so my clients have to understand coming on board that I'm going to be taking off. So my last day to work this year will be December 18th. And then I will come back on January the 3rd. And so that way my children get me home their entire winter break, and I can be a mom and not have to wear that double-edged hat. But that takes a lot of planning, and it's not something that as a new grad I was able to do. And I wasn't even able to do it until really about 12 years ago was when I started being able to say, okay, now this means a lot to me. So now I'm going to take time off. The other thing around planning, and again, they'll try to guilt trip you a little bit. I had a client today and she said, well, what do I do if my pet has an emergency? And I said, oh, that's great. I'm so glad we brought this up. Here are emergency veterinarians' phone numbers. Here's their location, and here are urgent care phone numbers. And that way, if your pet has an emergency, you know exactly what to do and where to go. And she said to me, she said, well, won't you come in? And I said, oh, I will not. So this is the time of the year where I'm planning that time off and I am not going to be available. The good thing is we have people that are amazing that take that time and they're not taking off. So getting over the guilt of being able to talk to clients and allowing them to know that, hey, I still love being a vet. But I also love being a mom. And this is that season that I'm going to be a mom more than I'm going to be a vet. Planning with the kids at home means planning for all the age groups. I know that there's been questions about different, which age or which stage is easier to have a child. And my answer is none. I think every stage comes with its own difficulties. In the newborn mom stage, you have the exhaustion, just the pure exhaustion. And you have families that are so excited to hold that baby. And now we've thrown COVID into the mix of it. And so they want to hold that baby in the middle of flu season and all the stress that comes with that. Then we go into toddlers and toxins, and they're getting into everything. And maybe even we have familial fights over the pretties that used to be there and kids that can't touch those. So you add that layer of stress. So what I have done over the years, and my children have made it to, my youngest is 9. So we've survived all of those early years by doing this, was just allowing my family to know that we want to have family time, but here are our boundaries and what works for our family. And I will be honest, it was not met with love. So it took a lot of years of training just to be able to say, hey, I can't let my 1-year-old stay up till midnight on Christmas Eve, which is our holiday that we celebrate, and then turn around and have Christmas Day with any sort of fun. And so it meant, hey, let's start earlier on Christmas Eve. If you guys still want to get together on that particular day, we'll start earlier. And then our hard stop will be 6 o'clock. And then I will start doing our normal bedtime winding down activities so we can still have family time, but then everybody can enjoy the next day together. For our older kids, it means talking to them and talking to your family about what's important to them. My kids are now the age, my oldest is 19, and she's now at the age with my every other child being in the middle of that, for them to tell me what they value most. And from all my children's ages, every single one have said, we value time with mom and dad. We value times with our siblings. We do not value time on the road. We do not value time running to everybody else's houses. And we don't value the in and out of a car. And so every family will look different. So just having those family meetings with your family and figuring out what works best for your family is what has allowed us to find that balance. And what are we going to do? So Thanksgiving, we just did an open invite and we told our family, whoever, this is our time that works. We will be at home. The kids don't want to travel. And for me, this is it. This is our chance at playing mom. And so we get these kids for 18 years. And I want to give them the childhood and I want to have the motherhood that we desire when we start to bring families in. So that, again, communication and trying to communicate with your children without any preconceived ideas. I think that was also hard for me. I didn't want to tell them what stressed me out. I wanted my children to have the experience. My husband and I decided we wanted our children to have the experience they wanted. Our parenting style was one where we wanted to create happy memories, hopefully ones that won't require too much healing from as our kids get older, because that's the other thing. We sit there and we put all these unrealistic expectations on parents, unrealistic expectations on children, and then we all have different traumas we have to heal from later. If we would have just sat down and said, hey, what works and what doesn't work.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that your answer was a combination of communication and boundaries, because really, I think that works for every role. You are in such a privileged position in many ways to be able to say, because you're your own boss, right? You operate your own business. And so
Yes.
you can say, we are closing for these days or weeks. And I love that boundary. But I also know that combination works beautifully in almost any circumstance. So when I was growing up, I have parents, one law enforcement officer and one hospital-based human medicine provider, right? And so my mom was a respiratory therapist. My dad was a law enforcement officer for much of my younger years. And what I learned very early on is Christmas is not a day, it's a
Right.
season. right? And so I
Yes.
think that becomes really important as we think about early career vets, emergency veterinarians, right? We
Mm,
do not have to push all of this into this 1 24 or 48-hour space. We can
exact-
take it from early November to I have celebrated Christmas with my family as late as just before Valentine's Day.
Yeah.
Because,
Yeah.
when you're a respiratory therapist working in hospitals and in the ER, when your friends and family are life flight nurses and all of these things that were my experience, they have all of the same challenges. And I remember thinking as a kid, what a gift it was to have weeks of celebration. And because we're not trying to fit in, we're going to go to all of these grandparents and extended families' houses on this 48-hour period. There might actually be time to go stay and enjoy days or a week of time there or not. And this idea of putting our boundaries where we want them, where we need them to be, and coupling that with asking our family members, right? Our immediate family members, our partners, and our children, what they value. I love that. I think that was so insightful to really find out what do each of you need from the holidays rather than trying to dictate to them, well, this is what a perfect holiday looks like. I've decided, so we're doing this.
Yes, it was such a game changer for me on the guilt as well, to be able to ask the children versus me feeling like I had to make a perfect holiday season. It was when I figured out that I could ask my children and we could have kind of a little democracy at home of what it means the most to you. And every single child answered, Mom and Dad not stressed.
Yeah.
And I said, oh, yeah, so that's us failing a little bit, because if our children have seen us stress, they are kind of in that zone of trauma. They're like, oh, mom and dad are stressed. Now we're walking on eggshells. What, we don't want our children to do that. And so it was a wake up call to my husband and I to sit there and say, why are we looking at holidays in that respect of trying to make everything perfect? And it was because that's how we were raised,
Yeah.
and so you only know what you know. And so we were trying to do the exact same thing, and it just doesn't work for our family. And so I completely agree. Now our holiday season starts before Thanksgiving, and then it will go all the way through the middle of January. We'll
Yeah.
get those more quality visits in with our family and with our friends. And we just kind of have this open house policy. So everybody can come in, come out, and we don't have the set times or expectations anymore.
Yeah. Well, and I thought that was such a poignant statement. We're failing our children. What if we're not failing our children? What if we're showing them what pivoting and making intentional choices look like?
I like pivoting.
Right? Because here's the
Yeah.
thing, we are imperfect.
Mhm.
I am positive that I fail something every day.
Right.
Right?
Right.
I think it's only failure if we sit there, though.
Yep.
I think it's only failure if we sit there and continue doing the same thing. I think if we're showing our children what creativity, what willing to consider alternatives are, what trying something new, even if it goes badly,
Yep.
I think if that's what we're showing them, that is pivoting. That is considering our options, right? In an ideal world, I'm a mom of a young teenager. And in an ideal world, what I ultimately want him to grow up to do is live his life making decisions from a place of his values.
Yep. But you're giving him the tools to be able to do that.
I mean, I hope so. I'm sure I fail at
Yeah.
that some days too, right? But I think that's the goal. And if we can circle back to what are our values and how do we live them out and what boundaries do we need for them?
Yep.
Because without boundaries, other people choose our values.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. We always talk with the kids that failure is our first attempt in learning, right? And so anytime we feel like something didn't go well,
Mhm.
instead of us looking at it negatively, I have to share with them pivoting. I love that. But anytime we look at something, we're like, oh, that didn't go well. We don't want to repeat that. Or we talk about, hey, that really went well. Let's repeat that. But maybe we amend it a little bit where we're taking this and replacing it with this. So I love the pivoting. I think that it will be crucial for our own family's more joyous season and every day. I need a shirt. Pivot, Pivot.
right? You know, I think it's a fun concept, and I'll tell you where I stole it from. It's not some fancy psychological theory back here. It's my son's robotics team, right?
Yeah.
When they need to do something and they're in competition for robotics, they don't make huge sweeping changes. They just pivot a little bit and try that. Okay, that didn't work. Let's pivot a little bit more and try it. And I took that in my head and went, okay, well, the big social work concept that goes with that is sweeping change doesn't stick. Incremental change is what really changes the world, right? Well, that's the same thing. So yeah, I stole the concept from my kids' robotics, because if we can learn something everywhere we are, then that's a big piece of it. Life happens where we are.
I agree. I love it though. This is now going to have to be our family saying. So I'm going to steal your words that you stole from the robotics class.
Absolutely. I like it in the form of a question. How do we pivot?
Right.
Right? How do we pivot from here?
Yeah, because we do it every day in our job too. I mean, we do it in every aspect. So we pivot when we're looking at patients and they come in off script. They were supposed to come in with just this problem and they came in today with X, Y, and Z. So we're really good at it with our job. And why
Mhm.
it's so hard to translate at home is one of those growing journeys for me. How do we pivot through all the years? I mean, we could go on and on for this. I mean, infancy all the way to college.
Yeah.
We see that as we continue to just fine tune what we're doing with our children. And in fact, we actually had a meeting this summer with all of our kids. We call them family meetings. And that way everybody loves it because they get their 2 cents in and everybody has a valuable voice in our family. And we talked about what happens when you leave the house, what happens when you go to college, what happens when you get married, if you choose to get married, what do holidays look like then? And so we decided again that at that point in time, democracy will look different. It will be
Yeah.
different days, it will be different weeks. And the one promise I made to my kids, and my husband made the same promise on a different conversation. So totally unscripted. It wasn't me saying, okay, we feel, it was kids talking to us individually. And what we told our children is we don't even care about the holidays when you're grown up. Those are yours. That's your family. That's your tradition. Those are your rules. We fit in if we fit in where you feel that we fit. But what we will do is 1 week a year, we will come together and we will go to the beach. And that will be now whether that is our holiday and we call it that, and that's the time that works for everyone. So we went back through all of our years of my husband's overnight positions, my ER positions, and we
Yeah.
found a time in the summer that worked and no matter what phase of our life we have been in. And we proposed this to our children as a starting point of what if we looked at this week in the summer as that's the week that we get together as our family, as our family continues to grow and become their own family. And then this year my daughter becomes engaged and here we are closer to closer to
Yeah.
needing this talk. And so I'm so grateful that we had the time this summer so we again can learn how to pivot as we grow and adapt.
Well, and that allows the traditions to flex and grow as the family grows,
Yeah.
but the connection to remain that central core tenet, right?
Yes.
Because the connection is really valuable.
Yes. But the
And maybe
date's
it's
not.
okay for traditions to change, right? The date.
The date is arbitrary, and that's, we have grown so much as a family just trying to remind our families that we're not their immediate family anymore. I think that's the hardest part for my generation, and I feel that my children at least will be equipped with this knowledge that once they grow up and they leave, that they're their own family.
Yeah.
And so that they don't have to do what works best for us. We'll be the flexible part in that because we will be in a phase of our career where we have more free time. We have more options, but that beginning part of your life, I mean, all the mamas that are in the trenches right now with those new babies, that is the most inflexible time for any parent's life. You are trying to survive while your baby around your baby's schedule. And there's very little time for you.
Yeah. Well, and I feel like we all do that thing somewhere in the first few years where we try to still pretend we can make it all of these places and be all of these things. And like maybe that works the first year. My son was born in March. So his first Christmas, he's like 9 months old, and I can make that work.
Yeah.
Right. can
Yeah.
sleep anywhere. I can be, but by the time we get to the second or third Christmas, it's dawning. Oh my goodness. If
Yeah.
I really force this and take what his needs are, which become my needs, right? Because I really need to sleep at least some point out of
Yeah.
24 hours, which
Yeah.
means he needs to.
Yeah.
If I take it and try to shove those together, that becomes unnecessary chaos. And we started this conversation with like, maybe we don't try to manage the chaos. And I think maybe we don't try to manage the chaos, but I think where we can mitigate it, we should mitigate it. And so I had that same determination that I came to in my first few years of parenthood, where I said, okay, we cannot continue to do this on these traditional timelines. So
Yeah.
everyone's welcome to come to our house, virtually or physically,
Yeah.
and everyone is welcome, and we will get everyone sorted. And I do not travel from this period of the year to this period of the year.
Yep. Because that's a big one. And you think about too, when you're in your early 20s and you get maybe 4 days of vacation that first year that you start into your work life, and your work life vacations become family centered gatherings. That's
Mhm.
not a mental break. That's not a vacation. And so I think that that helps to, if at least further help not prevent burnout. I think I'm saying it wrong, but you know what I'm trying to get to. If we're running ourselves ragged and we're not being able to replace that time with something that's going to fill up our cup, then we're going back empty. And so that vacation was not a mental healing oasis. It was another chore, another job we had to do. And we go back more empty, and then we have less to give our patients. And we think it's mainly the job, but I don't think so. I think that we just have to evolve as a profession and look at how do we juggle all the hats that women have to have,
Mhm.
especially as we are entering new seasons where we're predominantly women in the veterinary profession nowadays.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's really important to begin to embrace this concept that we are whole humans.
Mhm.
I do not get to walk into my office and put on my hat and say, I am only a social worker here. Because really, the moment the phone rings and it's the nurse's office from my son's school, I am immediately mom again.
Yeah.
We are at any given point all of these roles. And the question I asked to kind of start this is, how do we balance that? And I'll answer it. I don't think we do. I think we integrate it in ways that are authentic and meaningful for us. And I do think what that looks like and where those boundaries are, to your point about these seasons that we go through, I think those boundaries move and shift as our roles shift and change and grow.
I agree. I agree because I think that along those same lines, you don't know what you need until you're in a new season. And so you can't predict what you're going to need the next season until you get there. And then you have to figure out what works for you. And if you're not giving yourself that time, then I think we get into this almost this position of doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. We're like, well, this worked before, but in this new season, it doesn't. And so you have to just, again, continue to pivot, grow, adapt, and shift as we look at what is this new season with this child, with this job, with even my own personal growth. What do I want to learn in this season? How do our boundaries change and grow and reflect that?
Yeah. Well, and I think our own health and well-being becomes a thing. It's really easy to look back and go, okay, but when I was in my 20s and I was in school, I could work full time and do my internship full time and still take classes and go to school full time. And there's a question of maybe whether I should have done that in the first place. But
Right.
what I can tell you is I for sure cannot do that now. The
Yeah.
outcomes are just not worth it anymore.
Well, and isn't it weird? Because when we look at this for the younger generation, we wouldn't wish what we went through to anyone.
Yeah.
No, we survived it and we got through it. And I remember my first job, I worked 120 hours a week. And
Mhm.
when I boiled it down to my hourly pay, it was $1.20 an hour. And I don't wear it as a badge of honor. I wear it as a badge of I don't want. It's almost like when you're hiking you want to leave the place better than what it was when you came in. You
Yeah.
pack it in, you pack it out. I don't want any of my colleagues, past or present or future, to ever know what that is like. I think we can do better. And I think we can learn to say, okay, this is no longer a badge of honor to work these ridiculous hours. We do what we need to do to get the education. But after that, let's have fun. Let's find a work life or integration, like you said. That's going to take time for me to to change that language. But yeah, let's find what works for us without any shame. And so when I have colleagues, I just hired a new veterinarian, and I asked her during the interview, what would an ideal work schedule look for you? Look, what would it look like for you? And she said, well, I don't know. I've been working 60 hours a week. And I said, but did you like it? She said, well, no, that's why I left. And I said, well, what would an ideal work schedule look for you? And she said, I don't know. Can I work what you work and see if I like it? And I'm like, yeah, but I'm going to be honest with you. I sacrifice money for the hours that I work just because I learned to live on less. And so I like living on less to be able to have the balance that I have at home. And so she's working 25 hours a week with me now. And she's like, this is fun. I go home from work. I'm not tired. I can go on hikes. I can enjoy my family. I can enjoy my dog. And I like veterinary medicine again. And so I think it's being brave, having our colleagues be brave, and especially not even feeling bad going to their employer and saying, hey, this doesn't work for me anymore in my life, but I understand how I get paid, but let me look at it differently. Let me see if working maybe 30 hours a week or 35. And then we may come to a season. I have a lot of clients that will ask me now, but when your kids are grown, aren't you going to come and work 60 hours a week? And I said, oh, heavens, no. I hope to have grandbabies at that point. I hope to be traveling. And so, no, veterinary medicine will always be my job. And I will love my job. But in order to love my job, I need to have as much integration of my normal life in there as well.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a beautiful place to leave today's chat, is that idea of leaving vet med better than we found it. And then I heard you talk about at all levels within the system, right? Up here, where we're building a better culture in vet med for the entire veterinary community. And that looks like having clinics that meet different needs, because there are veterinarians who are happy and thrilled to be working 60 hours a week, and those who are not, and everywhere in between, all the way down to the individual. This concept of embracing that it is possible, and freedom is, hope is living from a place of your own values. And all of that, I think, is what leaving vet med better than we found it looks like.
Yeah, I do too. Then we can make the differences we need to make without running ourselves into the ground or all walking out of the profession.
Thank you for joining us today. We hope you enjoyed today's conversation. We wish you restful, connected, hope-filled holidays. For additional information about Veterinary Hope Foundation, please join us at veterinaryhope.org.